Dying lion pleads for help, then man steps in and does the unbelievable. The morning sun had barely crested over the Sierra Nevada mountains when Dr. James Sullivan's day at the Oak Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary took an extraordinary turn. At 58, his weathered face bore the lines of countless days spent in the California sun, each wrinkle a testament to decades of dedicating his life to healing animals others had given up on. His salt and pepper hair, more salt than pepper these days, was tucked beneath a worn baseball cap bearing the sanctuary's logo, a soaring eagle above a rising sun. The sanctuary itself was a testament to perseverance and dedication. Sprawling across 200 acres of pristine woodland in Northern California, it had grown from humble beginnings as a small rescue operation to become one of the most respected wildlife rehabilitation centers on the West Coast. The property backed up against national forest land, creating a natural buffer between the sanctuary's residents and the encroaching world of humans. That particular June morning had started like any other. James arrived before dawn, reviewing medical charts in his small office while sipping coffee from his battered thermos. The wall behind his desk was covered with photographs, success stories from his 35 years as a veterinarian, the last 15 exclusively with exotic and wild animals. Each image told a story of healing, of second chances, of lives saved through unwavering dedication. Sarah Martinez, one of his most promising junior keepers, had been with the sanctuary for 3 years. At 28, she possessed an innate understanding of animals that reminded James of himself at that age. Her heritage traced back to the early Spanish settlers of California, and she often joked that working with big cats was in her blood, as her great-grandfather had been a renowned lion tamer in Mexico City's circus scene. The morning rounds were proceeding normally until Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, pitched with an urgency James had never heard before. "Dr. Sullivan, emergency at the north perimeter fence. You need to come immediately." The tremor in her voice made his hands shake as he grabbed his medical bag, decades of experience telling him this was no ordinary crisis. The north perimeter of the sanctuary bordered dense forest land, a section rarely visited except during security checks. As James rushed toward the location, the morning mist still clinging to the ground parted before him like an ethereal curtain. The sound of his boots on the mixed terrain, dirt, pine needles, and scattered rocks echoed through the otherwise silent woods. When he finally reached Sarah's position, the sight before him defied all logic and experience. There, mere feet from the sanctuary's fence, lay a male African lion in a state of such distress that James's heart clenched in his chest. The animal's once magnificent mane was matted with blood and debris, its massive frame reduced to a shadow of what it should have been. Ribs protruded sharply through its dull, patchy coat, and its breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Sarah stood a safe distance away, tranquilizer rifle held steady despite her obvious emotional distress. "He's been here at least 20 minutes, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was doing the morning fence check when I found him. Dr. Sullivan, he's been watching me the whole time, but not like a predator. Something's different about this one." James had spent his entire career maintaining professional distance from his patients, understanding that anthropomorphizing wild animals could be dangerous, even fatal. But as he carefully approached the fallen lion, something in the animal's gaze challenged everything he thought he knew about the divide between humans and wild creatures. The lion's eyes, despite his obvious suffering, held an intelligence that transcended simple animal awareness. They tracked James's movement with a clarity that spoke of consciousness beyond pain, beyond fear. When their gazes met, James felt something he would later struggle to describe to others: a connection, a plea, an understanding that defied rational explanation. A low moan escaped the lion's throat, and he attempted to lift his head, revealing more of his injuries. Multiple wounds crossed his body, some fresh and bleeding, others partially healed and infected. His left hind leg lay at an unnatural angle, the bone clearly broken and protruding through the skin. The sight of such suffering in so magnificent a creature made James's professional detachment waver. "Get Mike and the transport team out here immediately," he instructed Sarah. Never taking his eyes off the lion, Tell them to bring the reinforced cage and emergency medical kit. And have the surgical suite prepped, we're going to need it. As Sarah radioed for backup, James began the delicate process of assessing the situation. Years of experience had taught him to read subtle signs in an animal's body language, to understand the difference between a creature that would fight and one that would allow help. This lion, despite all natural instincts that should have made him defensive and aggressive, displayed an almost eerie calm in James's presence. Mike Thompson, the sanctuary's head of security, arrived with his team within 15 minutes. A former Marine with 20 years of experience in wildlife management, Mike had seen his share of unusual situations, but even he seemed taken aback by the scene before him. "How the hell did an African lion end up here?" he muttered, helping his team set up the transport equipment. "Nearest private exotic animal owner is hundreds of miles away, and we haven't heard about any escapes." The process of moving the lion would prove to be one of the most delicate operations James had ever overseen. Even with proper sedation, a full-grown male lion was an incredibly dangerous animal, and this one's unstable condition made the situation even more precarious. As the tranquilizer took effect, James got his first close look at the lion's injuries. What he found made his blood boil. Beyond the recent wounds, the lion's body told a story of long-term abuse and neglect. Old scars crisscrossed beneath his fur, some from what appeared to be crude fighting rings. Several teeth were broken, and old fractures had healed improperly, suggesting multiple instances of trauma. The microchip they found during the initial examination only deepened the mystery. Its registration led to a defunct exotic animal dealer in Nevada, notorious for supplying private collectors and underground fighting operations. The chip's presence confirmed James's worst fears. This lion had been born into captivity, likely sold illegally, and subjected to years of abuse before somehow escaping and finding his way to the sanctuary. The surgery to repair the lion's leg and address his most severe injuries lasted over 6 hours. James worked tirelessly, his hands steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm him. Sarah stayed throughout the procedure, assisting and monitoring vitals, her face set in determined concentration. "I've never seen anything like this," James remarked as they finished closing the final incision. "The amount of trauma this animal has survived, it's nothing short of miraculous. But what amazes me more is how he found us. Of all the places he could have ended up, he came here." They named him Lazarus, after the biblical figure raised from the dead. The name seemed fitting for a lion who had quite literally risen from the brink of death through sheer will to live. But Lazarus's journey to recovery was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would test both his resilience and the dedication of his caregivers. The first month was critical. Infection set in despite their best efforts, and Lazarus's weakened immune system struggled to fight it off. James practically lived at the sanctuary during this time, sleeping on a cot near the medical enclosure, monitoring his patient's condition around the clock. It was during these long nights that something remarkable began to develop. Lazarus, despite his horrific experiences with humans, seemed to recognize James as different from his former tormentors. While he remained cautious around other staff members, with James he displayed a level of trust that defied explanation. Sarah was the first to notice the change. "It's like he knows you're the one who saved him," she observed one morning, watching as James checked Lazarus's wounds while the lion remained surprisingly calm. "I've worked with rescued big cats for years, but I've never seen anything like this." James's connection with Lazarus drew attention from unexpected quarters. Word of the mysterious lion spread through the exotic animal community, eventually reaching the ears of those who had once owned him. 2 months into his recovery, the sanctuary experienced an attempted break-in at the medical facility. The incident sparked an immediate response from James and his team. They increased security measures, installed additional cameras, and reached out to law enforcement contacts. James knew they needed to protect Lazarus, but they had to do it legally. Any misstep could give his former owners leverage to reclaim him. The investigation that followed uncovered a network of illegal exotic animal trafficking that stretched across multiple states. Lazarus, they discovered, had been stolen as a cub from a legitimate zoo in Florida. then sold through various underground channels before ending up in a private collection in Nevada. His escape had occurred during a raid by local authorities, though no one could explain how he had managed to travel so far or survive for so long in the wild. As the legal battles unfolded in courtrooms, Lazarus continued his journey of healing. The physical wounds mended slowly but surely, though the psychological damage ran far deeper. He suffered from what the staff began to call night terrors, episodes where he would wake suddenly, roaring in distress, his whole body trembling. James developed a unique approach to helping Lazarus overcome his trauma. He began spending hours each day near the lion's enclosure, reading aloud from books, sharing stories about his day, and simply being a calm, consistent presence. The other staff members were amazed to see how Lazarus responded, gradually showing more confidence and less fear. "You remind me of myself sometimes," James told the lion one evening, sitting in his usual spot outside the enclosure. "I came to this work carrying my own scars. Did you know I was supposed to be a human doctor? That was the family plan, follow in my father's footsteps, take over his practice in Sacramento. But I couldn't do it. After my wife Maria died, I couldn't face the idea of losing any more human patients. Working with animals, it gave me purpose again. Maybe that's why we understand each other." Lazarus lifted his head at the sound of James's voice, those intelligent eyes fixed on him with what seemed like genuine understanding. The lion had regained much of his lost weight. His mane had grown back thick and lustrous, and though he would always walk with a slight limp, his movements had become strong and sure once again. 6 months after Lazarus's arrival, the legal battles finally concluded in the sanctuary's favor. Several members of the trafficking ring faced federal charges, and the sanctuary was granted permanent custody of Lazarus. But James knew their work wasn't finished. They needed to give Lazarus more than just survival. They needed to give him a life worth living. The sanctuary launched a special project, designing and building a state-of-the-art enclosure specifically for Lazarus. James insisted on including multiple features that would allow the lion to choose his level of interaction with humans: caves for privacy, elevated platforms for security, and enough space to truly run and play for the first time in his life. The day they transferred Lazarus to his new home became a turning point in his recovery. Rather than cowering or hiding, he explored his territory with growing confidence, occasionally glancing back at James as if seeking reassurance. When he finally claimed a high rock as his favorite spot, his posture had changed. He looked like a lion should look, proud and dignified. Years passed, and Lazarus became more than just another resident at the sanctuary. His story, featured in documentaries and news reports, helped raise awareness about the exotic animal trade and led to stricter laws regarding private ownership of big cats. School groups visited regularly, learning about conservation and compassion through his example. James's relationship with Lazarus deepened with time. Even as both of them aged, James's hair turning completely white, Lazarus's muzzle graying, their bond remained unshakable. Every morning, without fail, James would visit, and Lazarus would greet him with a gentle chuff, a sound reserved only for those the lion considered family. 10 years after that fateful morning by the fence, James sat in his usual spot near Lazarus's enclosure, reviewing the day's reports. The lion was showing his age now, moving more slowly, sleeping more often. But his eyes remained bright and alert, especially when James was near. Sarah, now the sanctuary's head veterinarian herself, joined him that evening. "You know what I've always wondered?" she said, watching Lazarus doze in the last rays of sunlight. "How did he know? Out of all the places he could have gone after escaping, how did he know to come here?" James smiled, thinking back to that first meeting, to the look in Lazarus's eyes that had compelled him to take such a risk. "I don't think he knew exactly," he replied. "I think he was at the end of his strength, and something, call it instinct, call it providence, led him to the one place where someone would understand what he was asking for." The sanctuary had grown significantly over the decade, largely due to Lazarus's story inspiring donations and support. They'd been able to rescue dozens more animals, build better facilities, and establish educational programs that reached thousands of people annually. But more than that, Lazarus had taught them all something about the capacity for healing, both physical and emotional. As darkness fell and the sanctuary's night sounds began to emerge, James prepared to head home. Lazarus let out a soft roar, not his usual mighty call, but the gentler vocalization he seemed to reserve for goodbyes. "See you tomorrow, old friend," James called back, knowing that each day with Lazarus was a gift he never expected to receive. The story of the dying lion who pleaded for help became legend at the Oak Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary. It was a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary moments in life come from simply being willing to listen when someone, even a lion, asks for help. And while James had been the one to step in and do the unbelievable that day, he knew the truth. Lazarus had saved him just as much as he had saved Lazarus. Their story proved that compassion knows no species, and that trust, once given and honored, can bridge even the wildest of divides. The impact of their story continued to ripple outward, touching countless lives and changing them for the better. Every new rescue that came to the sanctuary was treated with the same respect and care that Lazarus had received, creating a legacy of healing that would continue long after both man and lion were gone. When visitors asked James if he ever regretted taking such a risk that morning, his answer was always the same: "Some risks are worth taking, especially when they come from the heart. Lazarus taught me that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all." As the years passed, their story became more than just a tale of rescue. It became a testament to the power of trust, healing, and the unexpected bonds that can form when we're brave enough to answer a plea for help, no matter what form it takes. In the end, perhaps that was the most unbelievable thing of all, how one moment of connection between species could create a ripple effect of compassion that would continue to spread, touching lives and inspiring change for generations to come. The legacy of James and Lazarus lived on through the sanctuary's work, through the laws their story helped change, and through the countless people who learned from their example that sometimes the most profound healing comes from reaching across the boundaries that separate us, whether those boundaries are between species or simply between hearts in need of connection. As Lazarus entered his twilight years, the sanctuary established a special program in his honor. The Lazarus Initiative, as it came to be known, focused on rehabilitating the most severely traumatized big cats from abusive situations. James, though officially semi-retired, remained actively involved in developing the program's protocols, drawing from everything he'd learned during his years with Lazarus. The bond between man and lion continued to deepen in unexpected ways. When James suffered a mild heart attack at 72, he was forced to take several weeks off from the sanctuary. The staff reported that Lazarus became listless during this time, refusing to eat regularly and spending long hours staring in the direction of James's usual visiting spot. Upon his return, their reunion brought tears to the eyes of even the most seasoned sanctuary workers. Lazarus, now moving slowly himself due to arthritis, had crossed his entire enclosure to greet James at the observation point, pressing his massive head against the protective glass in a gesture of pure affection. "I know exactly how you felt, old friend," James told him that day. "I missed you too." The sanctuary began documenting their interactions more thoroughly, collaborating with animal behaviorists who were fascinated by the unique relationship. Studies showed that both James's and Lazarus's stress hormones decreased significantly when they were in each other's presence, suggesting a physiological basis for their bond. Sarah, who had become like a daughter to James over the years, often found herself moved by the quiet moments between them. "It's like they speak their own language," she would tell new staff members during orientation. "Not through words, but through something deeper." As Lazarus aged, James ensured his enclosure was modified to accommodate his changing needs. Heated rocks were installed for his arthritic joints, and gentle ramps replaced some of the steeper climbs. Yet despite his physical limitations, Lazarus maintained his dignity and his special connection with James. Their story attracted attention from unexpected quarters. A renowned wildlife photographer spent 6 months documenting their daily interactions, producing a photo essay that won international awards. The images captured something profound about the capacity for healing and connection across species, showing moments of tender interaction between the aging veterinarian and his extraordinary patient. When Lazarus reached his estimated 18th birthday, remarkably old for a lion with his history of trauma, the sanctuary held a special celebration. Children who had grown up visiting him sent cards and drawings. Former staff members returned to pay their respects. James spent the entire day with him, sharing quiet moments and memories. You know, James told him that day, "When people ask me about miracles, I tell them about you. Not just because you survived, but because you taught us all how to be better humans." As winter approached that year, both James and the staff noticed Lazarus slowing down significantly. He spent more time sleeping, though he still roused himself for James's daily visits. The medical team monitored him closely, ensuring he remained comfortable while respecting his dignity. One crisp November morning, James arrived at the sanctuary to find Lazarus waiting for him at their usual meeting spot, despite the early hour. Something in the lion's demeanor told James this visit was different. They spent hours together that day, sharing a peaceful silence that needed no words. Lazarus passed peacefully in his sleep that night, with James keeping vigil nearby. The news spread quickly through the wildlife conservation community, and condolences poured in from around the world. But for James, the loss was deeply personal. He had not just lost a patient or even a friend. He had lost a soul who had helped him rediscover his own purpose. The sanctuary held a memorial service that drew hundreds of attendees. Former students who had learned about conservation through Lazarus's story, lawmakers who had been moved to strengthen animal protection legislation, and countless individuals whose lives had been touched by their story came to pay their respects. James spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his grief. "Lazarus came to us barely alive, yet he taught us more about living than any human could. He showed us that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds, and most importantly, that love knows no boundaries, not of species, not of language, not of anything we humans put between ourselves and the natural world." The Lazarus Initiative expanded in the years following his passing, becoming a model for wildlife rehabilitation centers worldwide. James continued to consult on difficult cases well into his 80s, always approaching each animal with the same openness and compassion that had allowed him to connect with Lazarus. On James's 80th birthday, the sanctuary unveiled a new education center named in honor of both him and Lazarus. The building featured interactive exhibits about wildlife conservation, animal welfare, and the importance of compassion. At its heart was a special display about the dying lion who had pleaded for help and the man who had done the unbelievable. Sarah, now running the sanctuary herself, often found James sitting quietly in front of the display, looking at the photos and videos that documented their years together. "Do you ever wonder," she asked him once, "if there was something special about Lazarus? Something different from other lions?" James smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "What was special about Lazarus wasn't that he was different from other lions," he replied. "What was special was that he helped us see what was there all along, the capacity for connection that exists in all living things, if we're just brave enough to recognize it." The story of James and Lazarus continues to inspire new generations of veterinarians, conservationists, and animal lovers. Their legacy lives on in every animal given a second chance, in every person who learns to look past their fears to see the soul within another living being, and in the ongoing work of the sanctuary they both called home. In the end, their story became more than just an account of an extraordinary rescue. It became a reminder that the most profound changes often begin with a single moment of courage, the courage to reach out, to trust, to help, to heal. And in that reminder lies the true miracle of their tale. That sometimes the most unbelievable things happen not through supernatural intervention, but through the simple act of one being recognizing the need in another and choosing to answer that need with compassion. Today, visitors to the Oak Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary can still feel the impact of their story. In the gentle way the staff treats each new rescue, in the careful attention paid to both physical and emotional healing, and in the underlying belief that every living being deserves a chance at redemption, the spirit of James and Lazarus lives on, continuing to change lives and heal hearts, one connection at a time.